All right, it's time once again for a meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR over in Vermont. Dr. Clayton Truder is the chair there. Now, tonight, we have a very special guest. One thing Paul Allen might like more than baseball is a good story about baseball. And as a young 21-year-old player for the London Pontiacs in the 1960s, he heard his share recounted by the legends of the Intercounty Baseball League. Now he's telling their stories and a few of his own in his new book, Bright Lights, Black Stars. The book celebrates the IBL, Canada's oldest baseball league, the players from its glory years, and the Black Stars who extended their careers in Canada when the Negro League south of the border collapsed. And tonight, he's here to share it all with us. Paul Allen, welcome to Northern New England. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. As my wife said, my cup runneth over. It couldn't be any better to be actually on the road. Going to do some talks tomorrow and the next day. And I'm in my town where I played 8 years of baseball. So it's good. And what an honor to be with you guys and gals.
We appreciate you coming out this evening. We're going to get started with your presentation. Now, we're going to let you in on a little secret here before Paul gets started. We were in the room here for a little while beforehand, ironing out some technical difficulties. So my wife, Molly, is here this evening to be our technical advisor.
All right, Paul, upper right-hand corner, click on your presentation.
Okay.
Upper left-hand corner. Sorry.
Yeah, I got it. And then I'm going to do
Share
Zoom
to everyone.
and share.
And you got it, Paul. Just give it a minute. It's loading.
Okay, it's loading up. Oh, that's great. There you go.
It is.
Okay.
It's all set, Paul. I'm turning off my mic. Everyone else, please turn off their mic so Paul can present.
Okay, shall I begin?
You are on, my friend. Go get them.
Okay, great. Listen, well, thanks a lot, Bruce, and welcome to the SABR chapter members in Northern New England and some of my friends and contacts, and obviously some of our friends, your friends. This book, Bright Lights, Black Stars, I think is a pretty good story. It's based on the Intercounty Baseball League, and I just wanted to show you where I am and where this league was and still is. Right in the middle of the screen is London, and that's London, Ontario. That's where I am. If you look down to the left, you'll see Detroit in southwestern Ontario. And the Intercounty Baseball League is one of Canada's, if not Canada's, oldest baseball league. And it started, and I'll tell you the teams that started in a little while. But when you see London, and then south of London, St. Thomas, and then as you look to the right center of your screen, another town called Brantford, a little farther, Hamilton. To your left of Hamilton, that would be west, is Kitchener. And then a little farther northwest is a little town called Listowel. They played in the Intercounty. And of course, Toronto is in the Intercounty. Oakville used to be in the Intercounty. Guelph, of course, was in the Intercounty. Now, the little place, if you go back to London, just north of London is St. Mary's. There's a town very close to that called Stratford, and Stratford was an original member. St. Mary's actually hosts the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, and you'll see where we are in relationship to Buffalo. The interesting thing that I found as I was researching this book is the age-old question of who invented baseball. The Americans claim that Abner Doubleday was the inventor. Now, there's some real good research in that book to the left on the screen, Baseball's Creation Myth. Abner Ford, Abner Graves in the Cooperstown Story. And I'd like you to get my book, but this is a very good book if you're interested in uncovering this question. Was the first game played in the United States? Was the first game played in Canada? And I saw a statement a little while ago, and I put it on here for fun: a boring truth or an exciting lie. And we know that baseball in Canada as in the United States, don't get me wrong here now, there's evidence that some type of baseball, rounders or cricket, there's some type of a game that was played in New Brunswick in 1793 in Canada and later in 1819 in Hamilton. Beachville, which is near that little town of St. Mary's, claims now to be the first recorded baseball game in 1838. That precedes the 1845 game that the New York Knickerbockers played under what they call Knickerbocker rules. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can read up about the New York game, the Massachusetts game, etc. on your own, but it's really an interesting topic and someone could really dig into it. But we do know in Canada that there were teams in 1854 in Hamilton, Ontario, and in 1855, there were teams in London, Ontario. As a matter of fact, a little town in red that I wrote in there, Ingersoll, just a little town, not too far from where I was born, in a town called Tillsonburg, actually entered a World Baseball Championship in Detroit and won the junior class championship. So baseball's been played in Canada for a long time. And if you look at 1868, a year after our country became a country, a confederation, the London Tecumsehs and the Woodstock Young Canadians and the Guelph Maple Leafs were in a league. And then the next year, it expanded, and Hamilton had a team, Guelph had a team, Kingston had a team, and Toronto had a team. The thing that gets the most publicity for Canadian baseball at the beginning is this international association, and it was really a good league. London, Ontario had the London Tecumsehs, and they played in a league, international, Canada team and United States, against Pittsburgh, Rochester, Manchester, New Hampshire, Columbus, Ohio, and Lynn, Massachusetts, a very famous team called the Lynn Live Oaks, and Guelph also had a team. And it was a really good league. Now that brings us to London's Labatt Memorial Park. A beautiful ballpark. I hope you'll take a good look at those pictures. The left side, of course, is a night game that was just this August. And then if you look to the right, you will see that the ballpark left field, if you ever hit a ball into those bushes or trees, occasionally there have been balls that have been hit into the river, and I will tell you about some of them a little bit later on. But it is now confirmed by the Guinness World Records and by Major League Baseball that Labatt Park in London, Ontario is the world's oldest baseball ground. I played 8 years there. It's a beautiful park. Now, let's talk about some of the players before the Intercounty League started. One of the first Black players to play professional baseball was a guy by the name of Bud Fowler. And guess what? He played in the International Association for Lynn, Massachusetts. And on May the 17th, he threw a two-hitter against the London, Ontario Tecumsehs. And Bud Fowler has now been inducted into Cooperstown, not as a player, amazingly, but as a builder. He was a great manager. He did a lot of barnstorming and was considered to be an expert that baseball owners contacted to get ideas on how to promote baseball. A couple of players that I would like to bring to your attention, that these happen to be Canadians. Most people don't know this, but Tip O'Neill played Major League Baseball, and he has the second highest batting average in the history of Major League Baseball. In the black print under that little red, you'll see that his all-time batting record of 492 in 1887 was adjusted because at the time, bases on balls were considered to be hits. So they adjusted it, and his average was 435. He may have been the first Triple Crown winner. Then another guy that I ran across, I was quite surprised. He played for the Baltimore Orioles and had a pitching record of 32-17. And his name was Bob Emsley. And he later became a major league umpire for years and years. And then there's another guy that maybe most of you won't know. This guy is George Mooney Gibson. And Mooney played for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he was a catcher, and he was a manager. And in one of the World Series against the great Ty Cobb, I don't believe Cobb stole a base. He might have got one. Now that's up to more research. But Gibson was a fantastic ball player, and he was from London, Ontario. He had a lot to do with convincing the brewery company, the Labatt Brewery, to donate the land that became Labatt Memorial Park, now the oldest baseball park continuously played. Here's another baseball player that most people would know. This guy's name is Oscar Judd, and he played for Boston and Philadelphia. He happens to be the first Canadian Major League Baseball All-Star, and he played in the Intercounty. Now let's get to the Intercounty real quick. 1919, the Galt Terriers. There's no town called Galt anymore. It's called Cambridge. It was they combined a little town of Hesper and Galt together to call them Cambridge. But the Galt Terriers, and on the right-hand side, the Guelph Royals. They were called the Guelph Maple Leafs at the time. The Kitchener Panthers and the Stratford Nationals formed the Intercounty League in 1919. They were the original founders. In 1925, the London Majors joined the league, and of course, they're continuously have played for well over. The ball teams in London have played for well over 100 years. Now, there's a lot of great ball players that played in the Intercounty, and time just doesn't give me an opportunity to go through all of them, but I just want to mention some of them up on the screen. Top left-hand corner, Ray Upper. Why do I put Ray Upper there? He was a 13-time All-Star, and coincidentally, he played third base in pro ball and was the third baseman when Henry Aaron got his first professional hit. The newspaper article says Aaron hit a line drive past the outstretched arms of Ray Upper, and Ray Upper played for Galt for years. There's Tom Parker, a Negro League player. Wilmer Harris was a Negro League player. The next guy is Chuck Olino, who played for the Cincinnati Reds. The next catcher is Harry Sutka, who played in the Detroit Tiger organization. The left-handed pitcher is Harry Schaefer, who played 11 or 12 games with New York Yankees. Bob Simpson. All of these guys were pros. Joe Adkins in the middle, great ball player, was a triple crown winner in Panama, played in the Negro League. So did Bob Griffith. The next guy with the P on his hat is the great Gabby Anderson, a professional ball player from Detroit who landed up in London, and I was fortunate enough to play 3 or 4 years with him. Lester Lockett. Another guy is Sadi Grote. He was a native born on the Brantford Six Nations Reservation, a great ball player, played all the way up to AAA ball, was a great friend with the great Gil Hodges, and actually Sadi named one of his sons Gil. Sherwood Brewer was a Negro League player that played in the Intercounty, and on and on. The guys on either side of skipping a lot of players because of time. On the left-hand side, I'll tell you about Tommy Warren, who pitched for the Dodgers. And I'll also like to point out to you the guy with the brush cut, Tommy White. I'll tell you about him in a minute. Russ Evon was one of my managers. The guy, left-handed batter, Jimmy Seabiscuit Wilkes, played for the Newark Eagles, came to Brantford, stayed, and actually became a Canadian citizen. He loved it so much up in Brantford, Ontario. I played 1 year against Jimmy, and boy, was he fast in the outfield. His nickname was Seabiscuit, named after the horse. And then I'll tell you a little about Connie Creedon, that guy on the right, and a few other players. The Dodger player there on the left-hand side is Goody Rosen, a Canadian who played for the Dodgers. A fellow on the far left, where it says turd on center stage, I think if you see it on your screen, was the first black player, a Canadian black player, to sign a major league, and at least a professional contract. He didn't go to the major leagues, but he did play in the Negro Leagues. This is the first black to play in London, Ontario, and in the Intercounty, Harry Coursey. Now, I don't know how many of you saw the movie Chariots of Fire, but that was the movie where the track team from Great Britain, Harold Abrams, won the 100 and I think the 200-meter race. And he was criticized because they thought he had a professional coach. Well, Harry Coursey did not make the Olympic team in Canada, but he ran faster than 2 of the representatives that the Canadian Olympic team people picked. And there was very much controversy at the time And it might have been because of his race. So we weren't absolutely, pure up in Canada. But Harry Coursey did play in the Intercounty. There's another great story here. And again, I hope you don't think I'm just promoting somebody else's book, but there's a book written about the 1934 Chatham Colored All-Stars by a professor at the University of Windsor by the name of Heidi Jacobs. And that team won the first the all-black team. They were the first all-black team to win a provincial, which is like your state championship in Canada. And if you look at the picture, the middle row from left to right, the second player is a pretty big man, and his name was Flat Chase. And I'm going to tell you about him later, but they claim that this man definitely, without a doubt, could have been a star in the Negro Leagues or should have played Major League Baseball. There's just no controversy. He was a great player. He actually landed up playing 1 year in London. Now, I want to move ahead just for a time frame to let you know how things progressed in the Intercounty Baseball League. In 1946, after the war, Bob Feller hooked up with Satchel Paige. I love the picture because look at that kick by Paige, and look how high Bob Feller's kick is. Bob Feller was quite an entrepreneur. And what he did was he organized a barnstorming tour of the United States. And he had his team composed of major league players, all white players. And he convinced Satchel Paige to pick the best of the Negro League players. And they would tour around the United States and play exhibition games. And I can tell you again, that the black players, the Negro League players, held their own against the white players. The interesting thing for me in the book that I wrote is to find that Jeep Jessup, Barney Brown, and Max Manning all played for the touring all-star teams. Jessup, Brown, and Manning were black players, all pitchers, and then Phil Marchildon was a Canadian, and he was in the major leagues, and Feller picked him as one of the top players. We all know that 1947, Jackie Robinson breaks, quote, the color barrier, and Branch Rickey brings him to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, the year before, he played in Montreal, and Robinson was very complimentary of the Montreal fans and Canada in general, and said they welcomed me. I felt very, very comfortable. And he hit a winning RBI. The people ran out in the field and they mobbed him. And Robinson, tongue-in-cheek, said that's the first time that a black guy has been mobbed with joy. The thing, again, that I point out to you in red is that Stan Breard and the guy that I mentioned to you earlier, Sadi Grote, also played on the Montreal Royals at that time. When I was down in Daytona Beach, I don't know whether some of you folks have been down that area, but if you ever do, get over to Jackie Robinson Baseball Park. It is a beautiful ballpark. It has that, I call it indoor-outdoor carpeting, but, that AstroTurf. It's a fantastic park. You go in, and there are storyboards about Jackie Robinson. It's certainly well worth a trip. Now, I wrote about the 1948 to 1958 years in the Intercounty, and the question is why? I call it the glory years. Why? Fantastic baseball. I think the chapter is called Damn Good Baseball, A, which is, a salute to our Canadian roots, A. But there were 45 Negro League players in that time that played in the Intercounty. There were 45 minor pros. Many of them basically left Major League Baseball and played in some of the outlaw leagues like the Quebec leagues. And they played, of course, in the tropics in Mexico and various places. And some were banned from playing Major League Baseball. Now, that was later overturned, but they were good ball players, and they just could make more money playing someplace else. And in that 48 to 58 period, there were also 20 former Major League players, or a couple of them that were going to the major leagues that played in this league. So I consider that to be the best of the best. Now, let me tell you about 1948 real quickly in the Intercounty. The London Majors won the Intercounty Championship. They won the Canadian Championship. And then the winners of the two national championships in baseball, semi-pro baseball, decided to play against each other for the Canadian American North American Championship. of the National Baseball Congress. Well, Fort Wayne had a loaded team, former pros, some major league players, and they decided they would come up to Canada and play a best 4 out of 7. They didn't want to have the Canadians travel to Fort Wayne. They just thought, well, we'll go up, and I have a feeling they thought it would be a quick victory. Well, it wasn't. They went 7 games, and I think that's probably one of the first times that the Canadian semi-pro team won the Canadian-American Championship. But it was a great series. There were some great ball players in there. 2 of these guys played on that team. You wouldn't know, but down in Chatham, those 2 men were 2 of my 4 minor league baseball coaches. Jack Ferris, later a great professor at the University of Western Ontario, and Joe Bayshard went on to get a PhD and taught at Michigan State and was a superintendent of schools and was a former batter champion. 2 other guys that were my managers played in the Intercounty. Tom Burgess landed up playing in the St. Louis Cardinal organization. He was a fantastic AAA ball player and had the misfortune of being a ball player that came up to the Cardinals when there was a guy by the name of Stan Musial in the same position that Burgess played. So Burgess did play for the Cardinals. Wally Post stayed longer than he did, but Burgess landed up playing for the California Angels, was a major league coach for the Mets, and spent his life in baseball. And this other guy was a manager of mine, Russ Evon, 2-time batting champion, runner-up twice, offered contracts by the Detroit Tigers, but did not go to minor ball because he was making too much money in the Intercounty. Now, that's something that happens. Here's another great ball player, Tommy White, and I point this out to you because Tommy was 25-1 during that 1948 series in the Intercounty and the Canadian Championships, and he beat the Americans 3 times. He was chosen to be the Babe Ruth Award as Canada's most outstanding baseball player, the great Tommy White. You see, London in the 40s won 5 intercounty championships, which is about an 83.3% rate of winning a championship. So guess what the other teams started to do? They decided that they had to get more help. And where do you think they turned? They turned to the American ball players. Yes, they had a lot of good Canadian ball players too, but they reached out to the Negro Leagues because after Robinson went, as Bruce alluded to, when he went into the major leagues, a lot of the Negro League players who were a little bit older, they knew they weren't going to make it to the major leagues. And I say this with respect. The white major league owners picked up the young players. They picked up Hank Aaron. They picked up Willie Mays. They picked up Larry Doby, Roy Campanella, and Monty Irvin. But the older guys, they could still play, but they knew they weren't going to get to the major leagues. So they were looking for a place to play. One of the great owners in 1949 was a guy by the name of Gus Murray on the left side on your screen. He was a friend of George Selkirk. George Selkirk was a Canadian who played for the New York Yankees. He played in 5 World Series. He was a 2-time All-Star. And most people may not know this, but George Selkirk replaced the mighty Babe Ruth in the outfield. And he actually wore number 3 until the Yankees decided to retire that. But Selkirk and Murray were good friends. And Murray wanted to build a team in this little town of Galt, Ontario, to beat London. And he was a wheeler dealer, Murray. He was a great promoter. He did all kinds of things. You'll enjoy the chapter because I parallel Gus Murray as Canada's Bill Veeck. And we know, by the way, there's a great thing called The Prince of Second Choices, if you haven't seen it, on Netflix. And that is Bill Veeck's son's story. And you probably know that Veeck had firecrackers that went off when they hit home runs. He wanted interleague play. He was a great promoter, and he said, hey, we may not be good, but we're going to have a lot of fun in the ballpark. And, of course, you probably remember that Eddie Goodell, the small guy, the midget player, came in and played as a special promotion for Bill Veeck. Well, the Galt Terriers put together a great team. Selkirk suggested that Tommy Padden, who was a former New York catcher, that Padden would be a good manager. That is Padden on the left, and that is Padden behind the plate, and the batter is Babe Ruth. And if you could zoom in and make it bigger, that's when he played for the Boston Braves. Well, the first guy that they picked up was a black guy from Buffalo who played in the Negro Leagues by the name of Jeff Shelton. And they put together a great team. Goody Rosen played for the Dodgers. He was third in the National League in batting one year. He was a small guy, ran afoul of Branch Rookie and Leo DeRocher. Oh, really? Leo DeRocher? Yes. He did not get along with DeRocher, finally got traded to the New York Giants. The Giants weren't very good that year. I don't remember what year exactly it was right now. So many numbers that I came across in my research. But Goody Rosen and the Giants beat the Dodgers like something like 7 out of 9 times that year, and with Rosen in the lineup. So the Dodgers and the Giants never traded players after that, so I hear. Another player that they picked up and brought to Canada was the great Tommy Warren. Tommy Warren was a native from Tulsa, Oklahoma, played a lot of pro ball, a great pitcher, was a World War II veteran, and may have been one of the first wounded veterans to return and play in Major League Baseball, Tommy Warren. They also picked up a guy who played for the Boston Braves, not very many games, but he was a great hitter, Connie Creedon, I should say. And then another ball player was actually had better averages than the pro players, was Vern Kaiser. And Vern probably should have been a major league player. The Burgess that I mentioned to you earlier, one of my managers that played for the Cardinals and the California Angels, said that this Vern Kaiser guy had a better arm. He threw the ball harder. He hit with power, and he was faster than I was, meaning Tom Burgess. He should have played major league, but his heart was with the Montreal Canadiens, so he played hockey. Now, there's our first Canadian to sign a pro contract, Manny McIntyre. You can read about him. There's another interesting guy that landed up playing baseball and owning the Kitchener Panthers, was the name Don Gallinger. You see the big black print, or no, the white print on the black background called Big Mistake, Huge. Well, I got that because I was thinking about Pretty Woman. You remember when Julia Roberts was walking down the street and that music's going bum, 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 bum. She's all dressed up. She's got that hat on, and she's carrying those bags of groceries because she had Richard Gere's, whatever his name was in the movies, credit card, and the lady had turned her down. And she walks back at it and she says, you're on commission, aren't you? She says, yeah. She says, mistake, big mistake, huge, and walks out. So I had fun with that because Don Gallinger, Gally, made a big mistake. He was a terrific hockey player. When he was 17, he scored an overtime winner against the Montreal Canadiens, and is the youngest player in NHL history to score an overtime winner. And that'll stay because of the junior age differences now. But Gallinger bet, we believe, on his own team. But he was suspended for life. And he always tried to, I say preserve his name, or that other people had done worse than he did. But Gallinger was a great baseball player. The Red Sox wanted him, but he stayed with hockey and landed up coming up into Canada and playing for the Kitchener Panthers. Now, I'm going to tell you about 3 guys. 1951, a great chapter called Wilmer, Shanty, and Freddie. Wilmer Fields. I put SABR.org up there, folks, because the SABR wrote a terrific article about Wilmer Fields. They actually, and this is hard to believe, but they actually compared him to Babe Ruth. Rightly, or maybe that's some literary a dream. I don't know. Maybe you just make that comparison. Maybe it reads well. But Wilmer Fields was a hell of a baseball player. He pitched for the Homestead Grays, and his overall career record for that Negro League team was 102-26. He came to the Intercounty, and you see, Wilmer had all kinds of offers from major league teams: the Yankees, the Tigers, the Browns. they wanted him, but he all he wanted to do was play in the Negro Leagues or the leagues of his choice. And he played in the tropics. He played in Canada. He played in Mexico. He played in Venezuela. And he went wherever he could make the most money for himself and his family. And he turned the pros down. He did play 1 year AAA with the Toronto Maple Leafs when Jack Kent Cooke owned the team. Now, those of you that have been around would know that Jack Kent Cooke owned the Washington Redskins, the Los Angeles Lakers, and he convinced Wilmer to come up and play in Toronto. And he didn't want to, but he stayed with the contract. He hit .297, broke his wrist. And then when he went back to spring training, the manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs wanted to change his style. And Wilmer said, no, I don't think so. And he left. He just deserted the team. He wasn't under contract in the second year. And he sent a telegram to Brantford Red Sox, and he said, can I play in your league? Guess what? They said, yes, please, Wilmer, come back. What a great player. He was an MVP in various leagues 7 times. He won the batting championship twice in the Intercounty. He had .425 1 year, and I think he was runner-up in his 3rd year. Terrific ball player. It's a great chapter. Somebody just said that they had seen him play. I actually played. Well, his son Marvin came and played in London for 5 or 6 games, and I don't think he would have stuck with the team, but they didn't find him a job, so I think he went back to the States. So I wish I had been more interested in baseball. Negro League players at that time, because boy, I could have got some good information from his son. Here's another great ball player who played in the Negro Leagues that came up. His name is Shanty Clifford. Shanty was a batting champion, a great athlete, a great ball player, and there's a lot of information about Shanty Clifford in my book. Another player, even in Canada, that is probably the best, superior, all-around athlete that very few people know very much about, except in Windsor, Ontario, because that's where he came from. Freddie Thomas was the first Black player signed to the Cleveland Indians organization. He played in the Eastern League, and then he went to the Outlaw League in the Provincial League, and then the Intercounty snapped him up because, again, they paid him more money. Freddie was a phenomenal athlete. Folks, you got to read the book about Freddie Thomas, the chapter on Wilmer, Shanty, and Freddie. Freddie played basketball at what they call Assumption College, which is now the University of Windsor. He is still the top career scorer in the history of University of Windsor basketball. He was so good that Windsor College, beat the Harlem Globetrotters when the Globetrotters weren't fooling around. And Freddie Thomas's team beat them twice. He was so good that the owner, Abe Saperstein of the Globetrotters, signed Freddie to tour with the Globetrotters. He also got him playing in the Negro Leagues with the Detroit, I think they were called the Senators, and the Cincinnati Crescents. So Freddie was a great ball player all around. He even played pro football. But a great story about him. Now, let's talk about 1952, 1953 real quick here. The other teams were trying to catch up to Brantford and Galt. Kitchener won it 2 times in a row. They didn't win it with this guy, but this guy landed up in Guelph, Ontario for 1 year. His name is Pat Seary. Who the heck is Pat Seary? Well, he had 4 home runs in a major league ball game once. That distinguishes him. Ted Williams said, I never did that. He played for the Cubs and he played for the Indians. He started with the Indians. You can see he was a big man. He always had a problem with the knife and fork. And Lou Boudreau tried so hard to get him to lose weight. He was a fan favorite, but he just didn't stick in the major leagues very long. But he did play. But he came up and played for Guelph 1 year and was a big draw. Another big draw was the Canadian Phil Marchildon, who was a World War II vet, got shot down on a bombing run during World War II, survived the prisoner war of camp. I think it was that famous camp where Steve McQueen movie was made, the Great Escape. I think Marshall Doan may have been in that camp, but Marshall Doan played. And the interesting thing about Phil Marshall Doan, obviously he's a white guy, but he pitched against the black guy I told you about from Chatham, Flat Chase, and Flat Chase won 3 games in the championship series against Marshall Doan. Marshall Doan goes on and plays for the Kansas City, the Philadelphia Athletics, and of course, because of the color ban, Flat Chase never makes it to Major League Baseball. 1953, Guelph signs the one-arm wonder, who was Pete Gray, and they signed Jimmy Wilkes Seabiscuit and the great big swish Bob Thurman, who later plays Major League Baseball. Pete Gray, very interesting story, one-arm player, played for the St. Louis Browns, played minor league ball, was MVP of the Southern League, played up in Canada in Trois-Rivières, drew people, maybe out of curiosity. But I talked to a 94, 95-year-old guy that played with Pete in Guelph, and he said, I'm going to tell you something, that guy could play. He had that one arm was strong. He hit the ball, he catch it, he rolled it across into his throwing arm, and he was a really good ball player. Walt Jeffries is the guy that I said was the older guy. He was 94. He told me some stories about Negro League players that I want to share with you real quickly. You can see that my presentations are not slow. Usually do maybe an hour and 15. So I'm trying to go very quickly for you to introduce you to as many players as possible. Udi Napier was a great catcher. He played for the Pittsburgh Crawfords. And Walt Jeffries was a white guy who played in the Pony League, the Pennsylvania, Ontario, New York League with the Cardinal organization. And Walt did a little pitching. I played against Walt in the 60s. And Walt said that he was warming up with Udi. And Udi said, Walt, this is the first time in my baseball career that I don't have to wear a glove. And Walt says, well, what do you mean? He says, you don't throw it hard enough to hurt my hands. He says, and the ball may never get to me anyways, because these guys are going to light you up. So that's the kind of stuff that was happening in the Intercounty. Everett Ziggy Marcel played. He was a great ball player. Boy, you want to do some research, read about his father. He's called the Ghost. Unbelievable story as a Negro League player. And then, of course, Leonard Pounding Pig, who played for the Indianapolis Clowns, I think was a Negro League batting champion. He landed up playing in Guelph and also Brantford. Now, there's my friend Jimmy Wilkes that I told you about earlier. Seabiscuit. Remember Seabiscuit? Oh, gosh, you got to show your age if you know who Seabiscuit is. A thoroughbred racing horse. Small but fast. And Jimmy Wilkes was one of the faster center fielders that played in the Negro Leagues. Jimmy said, if Willie Mays and I were in the same outfield, you wouldn't need another outfielder. And one of the guys in the Intercounty who was an all-star had never played against Willie, but heard about him from other people, said, they tell me that you could leave Willie Mays on the bench, put Jimmy Wilkes in center field, and if you did play Willie, put him on the right field line and put another outfielder on left field line, and Jimmy Wilkes would catch everything else. So he was a phenomenal ball player, landed up umpiring 27 years, and he actually umpired when I played. And then there is the Big Swish. He played for Brantford. That is the famous Bob Thurman, who later played in the major leagues. He stretched the truth on his birth certificate, or else the Reds probably would have taken him, but he was in great physical shape, and he played for Brantford, and then he went on to the major leagues. Now, here's a great story. 1952, Jimmy Wilkes, that I just told you about, was on the same team, the Indianapolis Clowns, as Henry Aaron. Aaron was a cross-handed hitter who played shortstop for the Clowns. And Dewey Griggs was a scout for the Boston Braves. And he had heard about him. And the owner of the Brantford Red Sox had also heard about this kid. And they went down, actually Dewey Griggs and Larry Pennell, the owner of Brantford, landed up in the ballpark the same time to scout this Henry Aaron. And Larry Pennell from Brantford offered Hank Aaron to come and play for Brantford. He was just a young kid, but there were black players from the Negro Leagues on the Brantford team. And Larry thought he could convince Henry to come and play. Well, what happened is Griggs wrote the Boston Braves and said, we need to sign this kid because the Giants are sniffing around. We already lost Willie Mays. Let's not take a chance. Let's sign this kid. So they signed him to a pro contract. He left the Indianapolis Clowns, and he played up in Wisconsin area. And, the rest is history. But Jimmy Wilkes was asked, is there anybody on this team that can play Major League Baseball? And Jimmy Wilkes said, yeah, that kid over there, Hank Aaron, if he's not a Major League player, my name ain't Jimmy Wilkes. Well, Brantford nearly got the great Henry Aaron. By the way, that card that you see is mine, a picture of my card. I had it in 1954, and I'm hanging on to it. Two other great Negro League players played for Galt, Jeep Jessup and Ed Steele. Out in right center field in Galt, Ontario, there's a river behind it called the Grand River, and there was a barn out there in deep right center field, and the fans from Galt used to call that barn Steele's Barn because Ed Steele hit, I think, a record-tying 14 home runs in that league, and many of them bounced off that roof. Now, let's talk about the blonde Hollywood hurler, Max and Barney, London's New York Yankee, Bobby Deacon, and Doc and Johnny. Harry Fisher played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. A great pitcher and a great hitter. Played for the Pirates, but didn't stick. Why? Well, he was a bit wild, and the Pirates did not know what to do with him because they couldn't make up their mind whether he should be a hitter or a pitcher. And as a result, he landed up playing for the Hollywood Stars, which would be comparable to a AAA baseball. You got to remember the Giants and the Dodgers and all these other teams had not been out to California at this time. So the only game in town was the Hollywood Stars, actually owned by the Hollywood Stars. Cecil B. DeMille, Frank Sinatra, George Raft, a lot of Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, William Holden, Ginger Rogers, Groucho Marx. They all had shares in the Hollywood Stars. See the lady on the left-hand side? That is a 17-year-old Batgirl by the name of Elizabeth Taylor. And then what a promotion. The lady that has her hand up in the air. And, as a ball player, when you're around third base, you're supposed to take a look at your coach. But you're supposed to see whether you're holding up or where you're going on into home plate. Well, this guy's taking a good look at Miss Hollywood Stars, Jane Mansfield. So that was quite a publicity thing for the Hollywood Stars. Now, Max and Barney were fantastic ball players in the Negro Leagues. Max Manning was, they called him Dr. Cyclops. He was a big guy, he had thick glasses, played in the tropics, and fantastic ball player, landed up in Brantford. And Barney Brown at one time was considered to be the equivalent of Satchel Paige. He pitched up in North Dakota, and Bismarck could not beat Jamestown. And Jamestown had Barney Brown. And the owner called Abe Saperstein, who was a bit of an agent for the black players. I mean, he owned the Globetrotters, but they had a baseball team too. And Saperstein was a bit of an agent. And this owner of the Bismarck team called Saperstein and said, hey, can you get me anybody that could beat Barney Brown? And the answer was, yeah, Satchel Paige. And will Satchel come? And the response by Saperstein was, Satchel go anywhere if you pay him enough. So there's a great story in my book about a league up there called the Mandak League. And Barney Brown and Satchel Paige pitched against each other. Frank Coleman was from London, Ontario, played for the New York Yankees, and he played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He landed up owning the London Majors. And one of his proteges was a guy by the name of Bobby Deacon. Again, you folks may not know who he was, but he was considered to be one of the better ball players to have come out of Canada at that time. He was a young kid. He was a first-team All-Star and the top hitter for the playoffs in London when he played there. Signed with the Braves, but was underage and had to wait a couple years. And then with Coleman's influence, signed with the Yankees. Went as far as AAA balls player, AAA with the Richmond Braves, and unfortunately, a guy by the name of George Altman was running between first and second in a game, and Bobby went to field the ball, and Altman tried to jump over him to avoid the tag, landed on Bobby's back, broke his back. They didn't think he'd ever play, but he actually recovered, went back, played, went down to spring training and tore it up. This cartoon, he had like 7 consecutive hits, and everybody was expecting him to make it to the Yankees. Darned if halfway through the season in minor pro ball, he dislocated his thumb and he couldn't hold the bat. They brought him back down to spring training, and he said, guys, I cannot hold the bat. I cannot hit. And he stopped playing baseball. But I'll tell you what a good prospect he was. The Yankees did not release him from his contract for 14 years. Why? Because they were afraid that maybe he would go and sign with somebody else. Now, this is one of my favorite chapters, Doc and Johnny. I played with the guy on the left, Johnny Ambrose. He's from New Jersey. He played up in the Quebec League with the Quebec Braves, Quebec, and his catcher was Doc Glenn. Stanley Glenn was a catcher for the Philadelphia Stars in the Negro Leagues, and Doc and Johnny became great friends. And they came as a pitcher-catcher combo to the Intercounty, left the pro Braves organization up in Quebec. Why? They made more money. They just offered them more money to come and play in this Intercounty Baseball League. It's a great chapter on Doc and Johnny, great friends. 1959, the last Negro League player came into the Intercounty, and his name was Larry Cunningham. He actually played in Memphis, and he played in the Intercounty. I played against him later on. So I'm almost done, but I want to tell you a quick thing here. Baseball has a lot of terms. We all know that nicknames. The Scooter, the Rifleman, the Big Train. All these names. The Sultan of SWAT, Teddy Baseball, the Mick, Slick. All these names. But the Tater, for the long ball is something that always stuck in my mind. And I wrote a chapter called Taters. So I'm going to tell you about them. What better way to start than with the great black player from my hometown, Chatham, Ontario, Earl Flat Chase. And I was curious on why did they call him Flat. And my own father told me that when he was in Chatham, Ontario, and he's from North Carolina, he said, he hit the ball so hard, they claimed that he flattened it or he tattooed it. And that stuck. But I also heard that he had flat feet. But he was a great ball player. And one of the home runs that he hit, not in the Intercounty, but in my hometown of Chatham, and Dom Donnell, the owner of the team that's going to be in the Intercounty, is watching this. Well, your ballpark there, Dom, is called Fergie Jenkins Fields. When I played, it was called Rotary Park. And Flat Chase hit a home run out of the ballpark. It's a short right field, but after the outfield fence in that green square was a football field with a track around the outside of it. And the report is that Flat hit the ball out of the ballpark over the football field, and a Canadian football field is 65 yards wide. So times 3 makes it like about 200 feet when you include the lanes in the track. It's supposed to have hit outside of that football field, hit the asphalt, and rolled into the Chatham Arena a long way. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible because Luke Easter hit a home run in Buffalo out of Offerman Stadium over the center field wall that landed on top of a house. And the lady said it sounded like an atomic bomb. It was well over 500 feet. Now, if Flat Chase's ball rolled 700-800 feet, Luke Easter's ball, if it hit asphalt, would have also rolled a long way. But Flat Chase was known to hit home runs, all over the place, long ones. I want to tell you another one. Here's the old Galt ballpark. And one of my friends in Red Ink, Court Heinbuch, I played against since he was a kid, walked off a home run that one of the players by the name of Roger DeWally hit. And you wouldn't know him, but he was built like Harmon Killebrew. And Court put a bag of potato chips out there with a rock on top of it and marched it off. But the story is that Wilmer Fields hit one even farther. This is one of Wilmer Field's home runs that is verified. In 1958, his last year of pro ball, he was playing for the Mexico City Reds. And in his autobiography, he said, I wish you could have seen that one because Aaron and Mays and all those guys played there. Wilmer hit one, right-handed batter, straightaway center field where that little gold star is, over the scoreboard, over where you see Fuji films that landed on the road. And it was a mammoth home run. I won't bore you with the details, but there's 3 guys that hit home runs in Labatt Park into the river. The first 2 guys did, but the home run of all home runs is a former Detroit Tiger prospect by the name of Larry Haggett, who hit one over the right field wall, over the road, and it broke a windshield in a car coming across the bridge. That's not so unusual till you find out that the car was driven by his wife, who was returning from a shopping trip. Talk about an idiosyncrasy. A shot by her husband that clears the ballpark, clears the street, and breaks the windshield of their car. But that's the kind of stuff. Here's another one. Dan Thumper Jackson did not play Negro League, but came into the Intercounty and hit some mammoth home runs. I'll avoid the story by Ken Benjamin, but it had to do with him coming out and arguing with the umpire. And this Ken Benjamin was a manager, and Thumper got between the catcher and the manager, and he grabbed him around the heads and started banging their heads together. And Benny says, "Stop it, Thumper! You're going to kill us." That's Labatt Memorial Park. So you can picture that the home run in left field landed. 2 of them landed in the river. I saw 2 of them. I was in center field for one, and I was on the bench on the other one. But the right field shot cleared both of those. Cleared that first road where it splits, and the other road was where the lady came across the bridge. And as she came over, the ball crunched into it. Chapter 33, I'm going to finish up. I added a chapter because I had the opportunity to talk to some people who played in the Intercounty years and years ago. And I called it Reminiscing. What I want to tell you is that Father Ronnie Hodera just died in March. I interviewed him March the 2nd, my birthday, and I recorded the interview. And darned if Father Hodera didn't die the end of March, but I got the interview. He told me so many things about the Black players in the Intercounty that I just had to add a chapter. He played shortstop for the Brantford Red Sox in 1949 and was 61 years a priest. One last story. This guy helped me whenever I was having problems, Eric McKenzie. He played 1 game in the major leagues, but the thing about it is he was the catcher, and another Canadian by the name of Ozzie Van Brabant were the first Canadian pitcher and catcher combination. So to those who have gone before us, and this is good in person, maybe not on a Zoom, I ask people because usually there's drinks, Bruce and Dom. We've been do talks where they've had the bar open. We have a few drinks. We stand up and we say to all those who have gone before us, all of those ball players, the Mick, Stan Musial, the Babe, and the guys we played with and against, we remember you. We enjoyed your baseball skills and the memories, and we raise a toast to you. But to finish it up, let's see if this happens. See if, I don't know whether it's going to come up. Maybe not. But anyways, we all stand up and we sing the song that is the second most sung song in the United States of America. The number 1 song is Happy Birthday. The other one is Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So I thank you. I did it as fast as I could. I could go on and on, as you can tell. Thank you for listening. The book is Bright Lights, Black Stars. Please get a copy. If you order it on Amazon, I think you'll enjoy it. And do me a favor, do a review, because they claim that sparks and spikes the sales, and I would appreciate that very much. So thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I'm here till tomorrow at 2:00 when I do another in-person talk. Thanks a lot, everybody.
There is no truth to the rumor that Paul did that entire presentation in one breath. I just want to get that out there. I don't want the man misrepresented. He did take a couple of breaths.
No, I do so many words per minute. I've never counted them, but I have gusts of wind that go even more. And the other thing I want to tell you, Bruce and folks, is, I don't have a script. I spent a lot of time researching and reading, and the pictures just kind of, clue in stuff. And there's so many more stories. I even did in the chapters a box called the extra inning. So there were little stories that make it personal if I actually experienced them or I heard them, which kind of, breaks up the statistical stuff that, sometimes, like, how many hits did he get and all that kind of stuff. So overall, I think it's a good read.
Do we have any questions for Paul?
Paul?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember how to stop presenting so you can see everyone who's raising their hand? Okay.
And Ben's got his hand up. Ben, go.
Thanks for the presentation, Paul. Bruce, is this book available as a SABR download as well?
No, it is not. This is
no, it isn't. But I hope it's in the works.
Yeah, because I'd still like to read it. It doesn't mean I wouldn't buy it. It's just, I'm just curious, right? Because
I would probably have to get some help from somebody that knows, who to contact or how to do that. But okay. Because of the United States and Canada traveling around, when I'm in person, obviously I bring some books, but I did put it on Amazon, so it's also a Kindle version too. So, but it's easy to get on Amazon. But I will, anything I find out through Bruce and SABR, we'll obviously share with you.
All right. Well, Paul Allen, that was fast and furious. That was a great presentation, Paul. I want to thank you very much for doing that for us this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to do it.
All right, now next week, Monday, October 16th, we have a rescheduled guest heading up our meeting that night. Dale Tafoya is going to join us, and he is going to bring to life the baseball renaissance that shook up Huntsville, Alabama in 1985 when the Stars took the Southern League by storm. He'll be talking about his book, One Season in Rocket City. So join us Monday, October 16th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's get everybody out of here so they can watch the Orioles and root for them. Gus is ready to watch the Orioles tonight as well. Pray for my Orioles, everybody, all right?
Pray for the Orioles.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll
Thank you, Paul.
Week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you. I'm glad to speak highly of me.